Visual branding. So we started our training by saying that a brand is so much more than just a logo. And I think over the last hour and 40 minutes, that's been pretty well unpacked. What I'd like to say is that a visual brand is so much more than just a logo. So we're going to look at the logo first, because there's a lot to that as well. But a visual brand is comprised not just of our logo and our sub-brand logos, but the colors we choose, the fonts we choose, the types of photography we choose. And so we're going to take a look at all these different elements. And I think it's important to point out from the very start that these choices aren't made haphazardly. It's not just, oh, these things look good and they all seem to play nice together, so let's use those. Just as our messaging comes out of our brand attributes, our brand positioning statement, our brand tone of voice, so do our visual brand elements. And I think you're going to start to see that. So first I want to talk about something we call the safe area for our logo. You can see that we have our corporate logo here, and then you can see the letter G that you see in our logo represented around all four sides of this. What we're asking folks to do when they display our logo is that they leave enough white space around it to make sure that there isn't an implied partnership or implied association where one doesn't exist. There's also the element of just leaving enough breathing room between different elements. And we use the letter G just as a guide. It's an easy guide to be able to say, okay, does it match, does it not? We're not going to drop the brand hammer on you if there's a couple pixels different. We're also not saying that if you're on the corner of a document, for instance, let's say that this is in the top right corner of your page, we're not saying that the G amount of space has to be left there. These are the guidelines for being next to other elements. If you're next to the corner of a page, that's not another element. Just needs to show separation between it and other things. You can find this in the brand guide. You can also find the different variations. The stacked version of the logo also has these sorts of guidelines as well. So you've been seeing the two-color logo throughout the presentation. There are also alternatives to be able to use when it comes to colors. You can use an all black, an all white, or this particular shade of gray. You can put those on top of whatever you want. We do ask that you use your best judgment as to whether a black one will look better on a light background or a white one would look better on a dark background. So use your best judgment. What is it that's actually visible and readable? We're saying the two-tone logo, the yellow and blue one, should only be on very neutral backgrounds, all white, off-white, that sort of thing. So I mentioned that these are the only acceptable colors. This would be a change for especially for our collegiate ministry, where their NAVS logo has been able to be in whatever color they want, their campus color, for instance. We're moving away from that, and now we're saying that one of these can be on any color they want. So it can be on the Nebraska red, it can be on the Clemson orange, that sort of thing. But the logo itself cannot be those colors. It can only be black, gray, white, or our yellow-blue corporate logo. And that's, we're trying to hem in our visual brand. We've had, as we've mentioned earlier, a visual presence that's all over the map. And that's been internally, we really love to market to ourselves traditionally, and that's been a little bit damaging to our external audiences. So we're trying to hem in what it is our visual brand looks like for our external audiences. So rather than try to guess what blue and what yellow you are to give to different printers or different web designers, you can actually go into the brand guide. I think it's on the quick guide as well, and provide these to printers or designers. Say, here are the Pantone or the CMYK codes, the RGB or the hexadecimal codes, and you can get exactly the right code, color that you need for it to be brand compliant. We also have the gray and we have the what we call the marketing palette for different uses, all in the brand guide as well. So you can insert these sorts of codes right into Microsoft Word. If you are sending out a MailChimp template, you can use that 6-digit number under the next to the HTML to set the color of the link or the button or whatever you want, so that it too can be within the brand color scheme. That's all very simple to do, and you have reference points to be able to do that without having to guess what color is going to match. So I have some Spitfire exercises to go through. Some of this will be drawn from what Becky shared about our sub-brands. Some of this will be shared, pulled from what I've been sharing. So let's go back to that newsletter. Let's take a look at the header. So tell me, does this adhere to our brand standards?
No.
Why not?
No G space. It's not
Yep.
80/20.
Not 80/20. No G space. What else?
UNF's the primary.
UNF's the primary. What about the styling of the sub-brand?
It's too big.
It's too big.
Wrong font.
Wrong font.
No divider line.
No divider line.
Wrong colors.
Excellent. Wrong colors. They put it in the UNF color instead of the Navigator color. This wasn't part of the things I've gone over, but using UNF's intellectual property, probably not a good idea. So you're not just associating you with the university, but you're saying that there's really a strong official partnership there, and that would probably be frowned upon by their administration. What about this? An address label. What's wrong with the logo? Not enough space. It's smushed. Yep, it's not on a neutral background. So it's either not on a neutral background, or they should have used white on that background, right? What about this email signature? This one's correct. And this one's provided on Nav Teams. If you go into the knowledge base section of Nav Central, we have all of our different logos to download, but we also have a brief primer on how to add this, and you can get the proper image. The spacing is built into the image file, so you don't have to guess, okay, do I need to put 1 space, 2 space, 3 spaces? It's already built in, so you'll make sure that you have that proper amount of space. So I mentioned earlier that that photos also play into a visual brand. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's just put this one up as an example for now, but I'll start to explain some other points. What's one of the most common photos you see in a Navigator newsletter? It's the group shot of the Bible study or the conference, and you see everybody smiling at the camera. That reflects 0 of our brand attributes. Not Bible-based, not intentional, not transformational. You might think, what about relational? They're all together. They're relating to the camera, but not to each other. So let's contrast that with other kinds of photos. You see this young woman has a Bible in her lap. You might be able to go Bible-based. There's definitely some relational elements here. Again, some relating together, some intentionality perhaps. Again, Bible-based. I have a Bible open in front of them. Perhaps transformational. We had this picture of a baptism at one of our collegiate ministries, so perhaps that's an angle you could take. You notice that those tend to be candid photos as well. Here's some different sorts of photos you could insert into some of the newsletters that we've looked at as perhaps not examples that we want to go with. Have an intentionality with that top photo there, and some relationship building there in the bottom. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but here's the problem. Those group photos are super easy to get. Those are really simple. Just gather everybody up. Hey, let's take a quick picture, and then I can slap it in my newsletter. And these other ones, you kind of have to have your eye open and take out the camera right at the right moment and so forth. So how do I get those? Well, in a lot of cases, perhaps not every, but in a lot of cases, you have people in your ministries who would love to take photos for you. They'd be excited to get to be your photographer, to say, yeah, could you take some pictures at Nav Night or at this Bible study? Maybe not every week, right? But something where you could say, hey, would you mind doing this? Just, I kind of need some of these things for my newsletter. Would that be something you could do for one of our weeks? if they're into this stuff, they're going to get a bang out of that. That's something they're going to want to do. Now, if you are in a position where you need to take these photos or you want to take some additional photos, that sort of thing, in our brand guide, we actually have a whole page on photography tips. So if you're a novice and most of your photos are taken on a phone and you're thinking, well, I can't take a good photo with this, we actually have quite a few tips on how to take a better photo than perhaps you're taking now. So review those. That might help you and help those that are in your mission or network to be able to apply these ideas a little better. Now, throughout this presentation and perhaps in other things that you've seen so far in our, as we've rolled out the brand, you've seen these little patterns, these subtle patterns intermixed into our visual branding. We have I think about half a dozen different patterns, both in all the different colors that we prescribe, and it's a way of interconnecting our different visual elements in creative ways. We do so with ways that visually represent some of our brand elements, our brand attributes. So you have some connectivity here, some relationship, that sort of thing. And that's just one example. We have others. So how do I get these? How do I get these? Where can I download these? We're being pretty careful about how we hand these out. Unfortunately, these are they're a little trickier to use. To be able to keep them as subtle as our brand guide would say you should be keeping them. So you can email brand@navigators.org and we'll ask, okay, are you doing this and you're just trying to slap it together? We'll be a little more tactful when we ask that. Or do you have a graphic designer? Do you have someone who really understands how to apply this, and we'll be able to review the guide and put them on properly? And if you do, or you're going to, we'll be able to give you a download for those, no problem. Now I want to, as you've gone through these and you think, okay, well these are pretty subtle changes. You know, we're not spelling things out like we are with our messaging, where now we're using vocabulary and now we're doing these different things. Does this really make that much of a difference if I'm not spelling it out? And I'll tell you, with visual branding, the thing I typically say with people is that you may not have noticed, but your brain did. That you get a different feeling when you see a photo of people relating relationally than you do with people just in a group with their faces just posed artificially. Now, with that as an example, I've had a few questions about, okay, well, can I just not use those photos ever again? Is there no place for that? No, there's a place. If you want to show the scope of an event, oh, yeah, there were 200 people there. Look at just how big that was. You know, sure, you're showing and not just telling. That's fine. But you can't rely on them because it doesn't reflect our brand. You can use them, but you really need to be, the visual brand needs to be upheld with something other than that. And this entire year, just in general, just as a point of interest, all of 2018 we've said is a slow, steady, and grace-filled rollout. We recognize that this is all new. These are big changes. The first time you might not get it right. And we recognize that. We understand that. There could be budget issues. There could be all sorts of different things. But we would like that in 2019, current staff, new staff, they'll have had some time with this. And we ask that they would, at that point, be making changes. We'll start to be a little bit more proactive about asking folks to change if they haven't by then.